heavenly restrictions are back in a way that I never really anticipated for the future of JJK. See, because outside of the fact that we just got episode 4 of season 3 of JJK, where Maki cuts down the entirety of the Zenin clan with her newly developed heavenly restriction, but at the exact same time, in the continuation of JJK's manga story in Majulo's chapter 20, which just leaked 68 whole years later, heavenly restrictions are still proven to be apparently very useful, but then again, maybe not as useful as being able to dole out black flashes at will, and apparently launch dismantles that level entire cities. See, because while yes, we did get a peek into what Sugi is able to do at the peak of his heavenly restricted powers in chapter 20 of Majulo, we also got to see what I can only imagine is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what Yuji's current power level is, which is insane. See, because if there was any doubts amongst the readers or those living in the Majulo universe that Yuji Itadori was not still the strongest sorcerer on Earth, boy oh boy does chapter 20 put those doubts to rest. I know we've been talking pretty hyperbolically about all of the feats that we've seen in Majulo up until this moment, like Dabara moving at the fastest speed we've ever seen, while he fights against what is probably the strongest iteration of Maharaga we've ever seen. But I'm telling you right now, without an ounce of uncertainty in my heart, the feats that we see from Yuji Itadori, the main character of a manga that took place 70 years ago in this universe, are the most impressive we've ever seen in the JJK universe. We're talking one-shotting Sukuna level impressive. All that is to say that there is a ridiculous amount to dive into with this new chapter of Majulo. And therefore, no further ado, let's head directly into chapter 20 of Majulo Review. But before we get to reviewing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional Nick video every single week, you guys can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're still doing Toads. We've been on Toads for a while. And the reason we've been on Toads for a while is because I've been on the road for a while, and I'm actually skipping a week, but I'm gonna be doing a double episode next week when I'm home. I'm back in Hong Kong for like 12 hours, and then I'm flying to Vancouver, and then I'm going skiing, and then I'm back home February 7th. And I'm gonna do a double episode of Naruto, and we're gonna get back in there. So, chapter 20 picks up directly where chapter 19 left off. That is to say that Yuji and Mino are still standing at the bottom of the office building that Yuji just blasted all the windows out with a huge barrage of blood. However, apparently, the volley of blood arrows that he launched into the buildings, not only into the human sorcerers, but also into the Samarians, didn't knock out everyone. Well, yes, the intention from Yuji's very complicated piercing blood was to knock out both the humans and the Samarians to ensure that they wouldn't fight against each other and worsen the relationship between the aliens and the humans. The long-haired Samarian, whose name we've been refusing to learn and have just been calling Kurt Cobain, you know, the one who's been leading the charge of Samaria's battle against humanity. Well, while Mino's yelling at Yuji, he flies out of the center of the building with a gigantic battle axe. But even with the momentum of his fall and his muscles rippling as he tries to deliver a fatal blow into Yuji's skull, Yuji, with one hand still in his pocket, reaches up with his other hand and stops the axe with just his finger. And as Kurt Cobain realizes that his most powerful overheaded axe attack didn't even reach Yuji's palm, he begins to panic as he monitors Yuji's cursed energy, but he notices something. And what he notices is that Yuji's aura has turned into that of a Kalyan, which is just what the Samarians, who don't believe that there's a difference between the Kalyan, their religious entities, and the cursed spirits, basically call cursed spirits. Kalyans and cursed spirits are not the same thing. Kalyan have physical bodies, cursed spirits do not. However, because for some reason the death of cursed spirits causes the members of the Loomer tribe to cry from the third eye, a lot of the members of the Loomer tribe, especially the warriors like Kurt Cobain, believe that cursed spirits are Kalyan. Anyways, as Yuji holds onto Kurt Cobain's axe, he extends his other hand and begins to feed cursed energy to it. As he says aloud, "You look pretty durable." And as he envelops his left hand in cursed energy, Mino watches on in complete awe as he revels at Yuji's ability to apply cursed energy to his fist with no delay whatsoever. Absolute precision. And as Mino is blown away by Yuji's efficiency in the application of cursed energy, Yuji looks up at Kurt Cobain, who he's still holding up by the tip of his own axe, and says, you'll probably be fine, as he, without even turning his hips, delivers a black flash into the chest of the Kurt Cobain Samarian, launching him back as he bounces off multiple buildings. And as he ping-pongs his way down an entire city block, Yuji simply says, "You won't die from that, right?" Now, outside of the fact that this is very much just fan service for Yuji or farming all over one of the most annoying characters in the story, this moment right here confirms a suspicion that many people have had for a long time. See, obviously, previously to this moment, the highest level of combat ability we've ever seen from Yuji happened during his battle against Sukuna. Now, in the JJK universe, that was almost 70 years ago, and Yuji is effectively not aged a day. So Yuji's not only been able to hone his craft, that is to say his combat ability, but also hasn't lost any power due to getting older. This is why people like Chozo, who are about the closest genetic match that we're gonna get to somebody like Yuji, was able to become a special grade cursed spirit and the best blood manipulation user we ever saw, because Chozo had 150 years to work on his blood manipulation techniques, which allowed for him to create things like supernova. And thus, seemingly over the course of the last 70 years or so, Yuji has been practicing his cursed energy application. Now, that's incredibly fitting for Yuji. See, because in the very, very beginning of JJK, a sneaky advantage that Yuji had in combat was actually how bad he was at applying cursed energy to his attacks. See, because Yuji was actually so inefficient at applying cursed energy to his attacks in the very beginning of JJK, one of the advantages he had in combat was the fact that after he hit somebody, there would be a delayed effect of his cursed energy getting to his target, and thus effectively Yuji had double strike. However, Mino staring at Yuji being able to apply cursed energy to his fist instantaneously implies that he no longer has those issues, which makes sense. He's supposed to be the strongest sorcerer on Earth, and he's been kicking cursed spirit butt for 70 plus years now. However, more so than a drastic increase in his ability to control cursed energy, Yuji is also very obviously displaying the fact that he can now use Black Flash seemingly on command. See, because, well, yes, we've seen Yuji do things like land 8 Black Flashes in a row against Sukuna, and therefore a lot of people believed that Yuji's innate technique was Black Flash. Black Flash isn't an innate technique. It is a hyper-specific application of cursed energy at the exact right moment. See, Black Flash only happens when cursed energy is applied to a physical hit within 0.000001 seconds. That is to say, like 6 zeros in a 1 after I come into physical contact with somebody else's body. If I apply cursed energy in that moment in time, I land a Black Flash, which is essentially a distortion in space that greatly amplifies my physical power. And now, seemingly, because Yuji has gotten so good at the application and usage of cursed energy, he's able to hit Black Flashes really whenever he wants to, especially seemingly if he's fighting against somebody massively below his skill and power level. Now we then cut to Kurt Cobain, who's been blasted a county over, and see that while he is alive, he is very much unconscious. However, because Yuji can't be shown to be taking sides in this battle between humans and Samarians, he, without even looking at Mino, fires a blast of converged blood at him, which not only scrapes his face, but also creates a shockwave that attacks his inner eardrums, causing him to lose his equilibrium and buckle over. Now, obviously, none of the human sorcerers involved in this conflict against the Samarian aliens are really excited about the strongest sorcerer on Earth amongst humanity not choosing sides here. If there's one person you don't want playing Switzerland, it's Yuji Itadori. However, Yuji continues on with his neutral standpoint, and therefore by telling Mino to essentially tell the ruling class of human sorcerers, the sorcerers that he knocked out, both the humans and the Samarians should be okay if they get 2 to 3 days of bed rest. And honestly, that's kind of crazy. Yuji, when faced with a battle against like 9 opponents, took them out from like a half a mile away through a building so bad that they need 3 days bed rest to recover. And I get it. Sorcerers have gotten weaker. Yuji's gotten stronger. But mind you, he did that using a technique that he basically did not use in his main story. But anyways, even though Mino's been shooken by Yuji's attack, still has enough energy to scream at him. Covered in sweat and on his knees, Mino screams at Yuji and says, "What the hell are you doing? Because you didn't help, Yuka's out there fighting for her life." But it's this point that we get a real look into what's become of Yuji in the 70 years since we last saw him. And the answer is nihilistic. But I guess when you're stuck in the body of a 17-year-old boy and you've watched everybody you know and love slowly well, age and die around you, that kind of thing is prone to happen. See, because even though Mino is sitting there trying to chastise Yuji for allowing Yuka to fight in a battle to her hypothetical death, Yuji simply tells Mino that he doesn't care. And he continues on in a kind of fourth wall breaky way where he says, haven't we had enough of Yuji Itadori? And like, obviously what Yuji's talking about here is that he can't be the sole defender of Japan forever. At some point, other people have to pick up the slack. The next generation has to fight their own battles. And Yuji's tired, but at the same time, in a more fourth wall breaking kind of way, there's a lot of fans out there that would love for Yuji to swing in and save the day, and defeat Dabara and Maru all in one fell swoop. But in a kind of genius way, Gege is using the in-universe events to tell these fans, you had 300 chapters of Yuji, and well, let's be real, he's not all that present in those 300 chapters. The universe has moved beyond Yuji, and while he may still be there, he's no longer the main character. It's time to allow the stage lights to fall onto other actors. Mino doesn't understand what Yuji's trying to say. Yes, and what are you saying? And thus Yuji continues on by saying, you know, they say old soldiers never die, they just fade away. So don't worry, I'll take care of all of the cursed spirits that spill out of Tokyo, and if Senpai's granddaughter does end up losing, I'll clean up that mess as well. And with these two statements, Yuji's making some pretty crazy claims, basically telling Mino, I can take care of literally every cursed spirit that tries to spill out of Tokyo, and also somehow if Dabara defeats Maharaga, don't worry, I can defeat Dabara rather easily. And consider the fact that we've seen Dabara kill Maharaga no less than a dozen times, my light fell, and Dabara is currently pulling off the most impressive speed feats we've seen out of any JJK character ever. It's kind of crazy to assume that somehow Yuji is still out of Dabara's ballpark. I mean, the dude's got light-based drop kicks, the kind of things that I've stated would be able to kill Sukuna, and yet Yuji doesn't even deem him to be a threat. And honestly, based off what we see from Yuji a little bit later in this chapter, these claims aren't ridiculous. But Yuji continues on by saying, right now, what I'm going to focus on doing is making sure that nobody interrupts those two. Well, actually, I guess those four. And this is kind of a cool moment from Yuji that really solidifies the fact that he's not taking sides in this whole debacle. See, because, well, yes, Yuji says if Yuka dies and Maharaga is defeated, I'll go over there and kill Dabara to ensure that humanity's survival is guaranteed, by saying I want to make sure that nobody interrupts those four. Yuji acknowledges that all four people fighting, that being Maru, Dabara, Yuka, and Tsurugi, are all fighting for their own worlds, or fighting for what they believe to be the common good. And I think it's kind of cool to see Yuji, who's dedicated the majority of his life to protecting Japan in a thankless job that is being a sorcerer, now finally kind of take a hands-off approach. See, because this is one of the biggest talking points in JJK, that sorcerers like Geto and Gojo and Nanami would all struggle in dark alleys in battles against cursed spirits that the humans that they were protecting would never know about. And while Yuji, when he was a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed 17-year-old, didn't necessarily understand this doom and gloom mentality from the older sorcerers, it's very interesting to see how his mentality has changed over the course of almost a century of life. But as Yuji walks away from Mino, Mino screams at him that he'll never forget him, nor forgive him, which makes Yuji laugh as he walks away and says, good, I get lonely sometimes. It's nice to know he'll be thinking about me. And as Yuji walks away, we see his face as he stares off into the distance and thinks, this is how it should be, right, Sensei? Clearly asking the question to Gojo, who passed on the responsibility of defeating Sukuna and defending Japan to Yuji. And while the passing of that torch moment came via Gojo's death, in the lead up to the battle against Sukuna, Gojo prepared all of his students, Yuta, Yuji, everybody, for the possibility that they may have to be the people to take out Sukuna. And thus, in a way, Yuji is doing the exact same thing right now, by entrusting Yuka and Tsurugi to take on their generation's biggest threat. Now, it's at this point that we cut away from Yuji to Dabara and Maharaga, and we see that once again, Dabara's doing a Maharaga better than Maharaga could ever hope to, as Dabara's rapidly advancing and adapting in combat with Maharaga to get massively more powerful. See, because for those of you who don't remember, in the last chapter, after Dabara landed a near light speed kick on Maharaga's face, a kick that almost eviscerated the entirety of Maharaga, Dabara thought back about how the sorcerers of Earth had offered to heal Cross after he had been shot down by a human sorcerer, which made Dabara come to the realization that human cursed energy can be used needs to heal. That, paired with the positive energy that Dabara had felt resonating off Maharaga's sword of extermination, allowed for Dabara to figure out how to times negative energy by negative energy to create positive energy and heal his destroyed leg. But now Dabara is taking the application of positive energy one step further. See, because while yes, Dabara acknowledges when we cut back to him that positive energy allows for him to heal his body at a drastic rate, he also begins to wonder about what would happen if he poured this positive energy into a curse technique. And I know what some of you are thinking, wait, no, Nick, how do you use positive energy for a curse technique? Aren't curse techniques inherently supposed to be negative energy? And the answer to that is no. And Gege realizes that a couple of you probably don't remember how this process works, and therefore as Dabara begins to build out a ball of dark light, he asks Maharaga, who doesn't talk, hey, what's this technique called on Earth? And as if to answer the question for Maharaga, the narrator then kicks in at this moment and says a new option enters the fray. Curse technique reversal. And with it, Dabara reclaims his path to victory against Maharaga. But Nick, what's curse technique reversal? Good question. Exactly what it sounds like. By pouring positive energy into a curse technique that you already have, you're able to make a version of that curse technique that does the exact opposite thing that your curse technique usually does. The best and most well-known application of curse technique reversal is Gojo's red and blue. Gojo's blue attracts things, and it's also why he's able to use it to teleport, while Gojo's curse technique reversal red blows things away with an explosive force. So it stands to reason, considering the fact that the only curse technique we've seen from Dabara is some kind of light-based beam, that a curse technique reversal application of that curse technique will probably have something to do with like dark matter or black holes, or maybe just like black light. I personally hope it's not some kind of black hole technique, because that's just what Yuki had. Like, that's just star rage. It's just artificial mass, and she was able to create enough artificial mass that it basically made a mini black hole. But if I had to say honestly, what is the opposite of a light-based curse technique? I don't know. Black hole or darkness or shadows would probably be my best answer. However, regardless of what the technique actually does, it's being physically displayed to be the opposite of Dabara's regular curse technique, which is a light-based technique, by being an orb of darkness that he's controlling. Now, any kind of curse technique reversal is going to be incredibly advantageous for Dabara in this battle against Maharaga. See, because while Maharaga has adapted to Dabara's innate technique, his light-based technique, Maharaga has not adapted to his curse technique reversal, in the same way that Maharaga had to adapt to not only Gojo's blue, but also his red and his purple and his infinite void. Tie that into the fact that any curse technique reversal was also going to be built out of positive energy, and the fact that Maharaga as a Shikigami is made entirely out of cursed energy, that is to say, negative energy. And while Maharaga itself does use a sort of extermination, which is focused around positive energy and has a ridiculous healing factor, which also focuses around positive energy is especially useful against cursed spirits and Shikigami, something that Maharaga knows, which is why it has the sort of extermination and uses positive energy in the first place. And therefore, yes, Dabara has reclaimed his path to victory against Maharaga. And as he makes this orb of black light, he thinks to himself that with his next attack, he has to wipe out Maharaga entirely to ensure that he can't adapt. However, before this curse technique reversal can be launched, we cut back to Sugi and Maru. And the two of them are still launching a barrage of punches and kicks at each other, and a close-quarter combat duel to the death. However, while Sugi may have the upper hand in terms of physical prowess, Maru still has his chaos and control curse technique, which allows for Maru to make the warm air ice in the industrial park filled with growing roots, all things that Maru tries to use to take out Sugi. But even though Maru is able to encase the majority of Saruka's body in ice, Saruka's sheer curse energy output allows for him to break out of it with ease. And after shattering the ice that's encased him, as Maru closes in to try and land a kill shot, Sugi creates some distance between the two of them by launching ice shards at Maru at high speed. But it's at this moment that things get real interesting. See, because remember earlier when I said that heavenly restrictions were real back in? I'm starting to think that these chapters of Majula are very specifically being released in coordination with certain events that are happening in the JJK anime right now. Because Sugi, after he makes a little distance between him and Maru, says Rika-san, and then most likely telepathically communicates something with her that she, in response to, out loud says, okay. I like that you're a little bit mean. At which point Saruka strikes the ground with her palm and begins to grab something out of her shadow. And from her shadow she pulls the split soul katana. Now, for those of you who don't remember what the split soul katana is, that's kind of impressive considering the fact that it is literally reintroduced in episode 4 of season 3 of JJK, which just came out. But the split soul katana was a katana that was used by Toji originally. However, the iteration that Maki has is actually a replica of the split soul katana made by Mai as her last parting gift to Maki. Very specifically, Mai made this split soul katana so Maki could use it to eradicate the Zenin clan, and because the split soul katana has this funny little ability to bypass all conventional durability and directly slice the soul of anybody who's cut by it. You know, so it's ridiculously broken. Now, Nick, how do you know this is Maki's split soul katana and not Toji's? I don't, but it'd be a whole lot more thematically appropriate if Tsurugi asked Rika to pull up the sword of the woman who ended up marrying the man that Rika was in love with. Now, as to how Rika was able to pull the split soul katana out of her shadow, I can't super say. We know that Rika has some control over shadow-based abilities. We've seen her appear in the shadows of people multiple times, like she did with Yuji at the beginning of season 3. Now, so far as I can recall, we've never seen her use her shadow to store anything, but considering the blending of the Zenin blood with Yuta's blood, and therefore I guess kind of Rika's blood, more like Rika's cursed energy, and how the 10 shadows technique very much allows for you to store things in your shadows, this combination of Tsurugi and Rika being able to store the split soul katana in their shadow is not all that surprising. And also, like I said, I could just not be remembering the times when Rika's pulled things out of her shadows, because like we've already established, Rika does have some shadow-based abilities. But anyways, after Tsurugi pulls out the split soul katana to use in battle against Maru, Rika tells him to just swing with everything he's got, and she'll put her power behind his swings. But as Tsurugi loads up a huge swing with the split soul katana, Maru actually turns away from him, looking off into the distance, because off in the distance is rising a wave of cursed spirits. See, a tsunami of cursed spirits is currently hurtling their way towards Maru and Tsurugi. And while Maru, in the most logical, deep center of his soul, understands that these cursed spirits are different from the Kalyan of Samaria, a part of him is still drawn towards these cursed spirits, and thus he turns his back to Tsurugi. Now, it's this point that Maru thinks to himself, no, they started migrating over here out of fear of Dabara. And this, kind of like the split soul katana, is a topic that we've seen come up recently in the JJK anime. See, because in the JJK anime, when Oji, who is Maki and Mai's father, throws them into the Zenin penalty room, he lets them know that this room is filled with grade 2 and lower cursed spirits. And while those cursed spirits might be cowering away right now out of fear of him once he left, they would come out to eat them. And thus, that's exactly what's happening right now in Tokyo. Dabara and Maharaga are releasing so much power on the other side of the city that all of the cursed spirits in the abandoned zone of Tokyo have begun to flood their way towards Tsurugi and Maru. Now, if you'll remember from last chapter, the human sorcerers augmented the barrier around Tokyo to try and funnel all of the cursed spirits in Tokyo towards the ocean, so they could continue with some kind of great purge of the cursed spirits now that the strongest fighters amongst the Samarians were occupied fighting against Yuka and Tsurugi. However, seemingly that plan's not working at all, and thus we cut to Yuji, who says aloud, uh-oh, doesn't seem as though they're being redirected at all. And thus he thinks to himself, they probably underestimated how many cursed spirits were inside of Tokyo now that they've had to miss a great purge or two. And thus Yuji once again aloud says, well, guess it can't be helped since this is a first after all. And we see him point 2 fingers towards the wave of cursed spirits. And upon pointing those 2 fingers, he utters one word he knows quite well. Dismantle. And all the while, Saruka are loading up a massive swing at Maru with their split soul katana, and thus at the exact same time, Yuji fires off a dismantle, which fires across the city of Tokyo like a laser beam fired from Chozo's hands to wipe out every single one of the cursed spirits. All the while, Saruka unleashes a devastating slash with the split soul katana. We then pan out over the abandoned city of Tokyo to see the fallout of these 2 attacks, and they are easily the 2 biggest and most powerful attacks we have ever seen in JJK. Now, the high water point we used for the biggest attack we ever saw in JJK, that is to say JJK like actual JJK, not Majulo, was Sukuna's final domain expansion, a 200-meter wide circle of thermobaric explosion. In all of JJK, that singular attack is by far and away the most offensively devastating. Sukuna is, and always will be, the strongest character from JJK, and that binding vow-laden domain expansion was the strongest attack we ever saw from Sukuna, and thus the high watermark for AP in the JJK universe was being able to completely decimate an area in 200 meters in all directions. And while that is crazy powerful, relative to a lot of the things we've seen in Majulo, it's getting massively overshadowed. See, not only because we've seen things from Dabara, like him being able to fire light-based projectiles or get his body up to relativistic speeds, but also we've seen several attacks now with explosive radii much larger than that of Sukuna's strongest ever domain expansion. And both this attack from Saruka and this dismantle, not even a cleave, a dismantle, the weaker of Sukuna's two slashing attacks, have much larger explosive radii than the strongest attack we ever saw from Sukuna, with both of these attacks happening simultaneously, almost destroying the entirety of Tokyo, not just a neighborhood, the entirety of Tokyo. See, the battle between Gojo and Sukuna left a fair portion of Shinjuku destroyed. The Shibuya incident left a slightly smaller portion of Shibuya destroyed. However, both of these attacks are very clearly shown destroying several neighborhoods in Tokyo simultaneously. We are talking 5 to 10 times more explosive power than Sukuna's thermobaric domain expansion. And considering the fact that Yuji did not say a chant, didn't need to load up any kind of power, and only used the dismantle, that means we are not looking at the peak of his power. I mean, we still don't even know what his domain expansion does. However, after seeing this ridiculous display of power that allowed for him to essentially eradicate all of the cursed spirits in Tokyo with one attack, him claiming that he'd be able to clean up Yuka's mess if she lost, it doesn't sound like he was lying at all. We then, after this crazy unleashing of offensive force, flash back to Maru and Tsurugi, as Maru is being crippled by the amount of tears running down from his third eye as they gush out of his forehead, as the pain sears into his brain as he screams that too many of them just died and that the backlash is too large. See, because remember, even though cursed spirits and Kalyans are not the same thing, for some reason, Samarians, specifically those of the Loomer tribe, experience the same pain in their brain and the tears running down from their third eye that they experience when a Kalyan dies when a cursed spirit dies. However, Tsurugi decides this is a fantastic time to take down Maru once and for all, as he lunges at Maru with the split soul katana, but Maru gets a rock in front of him to block the attack, leading to Tsurugi's blow landing too shallow. And thus Maru is able to regain his footing as he redraws his sword and tells Tsurugi he's ending it all right here. But before the two can cross blades one final time, we see Tsurugi thank Rika as the mask he was wearing of Rika's clatters down to the ground, as she tells the grandchild of the man she loves, good luck. Now this confuses Maru, as it makes no sense to him that Tsurugi would choose this moment to undo his transformation, and he notices that Tsurugi's cursed energy is shrinking. But we see on the next page, before Maru's even able to react, that Tsurugi has closed the distance between the two of them. And as Maru stares down at Tsurugi in abject horror, he realizes that Tsurugi's gotten even faster than he was when he was bound to Rika, because now he's let go of his power. And in the last panel of the last page of this chapter, we see a blood splatter all over a no U-turn sign, as if to say, this is the point of no return. Now, some of you are probably wondering, Nick, what happened here? And honestly, like I said earlier, I genuinely believe that the Majulo chapter events are being planned around exactly what's happening in the anime right now. See, because in the same way that Mai had to die in order for Maki to reach the truest heights of her heavenly restriction, on account of the fact that identical twins are viewed as the same person in the eyes of Jujutsu, and therefore so long as Mai had a little bit of cursed energy, Maki would always be considered to have a little bit of cursed energy, even if it wasn't hers, and therefore Maki wouldn't be able to reach the true heights of heavenly restriction that she wanted to, that would put her in the realm of Toji Zenin's level of strength. And what I believe we just saw happen now in chapter 20 was the separation of Tsurugi from Rika's cursed energy. So even though it was Yuka who was originally gifted Yuta's ring, and therefore Yuka who was supposed to have the connection to Rika, because Tsurugi was the eldest and deemed to be the strongest by the Gojo clan, he was given the fairly heirloom of Yuta's ring. However, I believe Rika's mask falling off Tsurugi is a symbolic representation of the end of their relationship. See, an important detail about this chapter is that Rika was able to access her own shadow to pull out the split soul katana. That is to say that in some way or another, Rika has the ability to tap into the 10 Shadows pocket dimension. The 10 Shadows pocket dimension that Yuka is currently lifelessly floating in a state of suspended death until either Maharaga or Dabara is defeated. However, if Tsurugi and Rika have now been symbolically split, which has allowed for Tsurugi to rid himself of all cursed energy whatsoever, achieving full heavenly restriction, it seems as though it wouldn't be ridiculous to assume that Rika's gonna be popping into the Shadow universe to go pull up the other half of Yuta's offspring. And consider the fact that Rika's reverse curse technique allowed for Yuta to survive brain surgery twice, I don't think a couple of tumors in Yuka's brain is gonna be too big of an issue for Rika. But then again, what do I know? It's just my job to talk about JJK properties. What do you guys think is going to be coming up in these next couple of chapters? Do you believe Rika's going to head over to Yuka, or do you think Yuka is kaput for good? Let me know in the comments below. While you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So excuse me, it's 2 a.m. in Hong Kong and 3 a.m. body time, and I got a flight at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So